Hazor, the Canaanite fortress city located in the Upper Galilee and ancient trade route crossroad linking Europe, Asia, and Africa, having an extremely vital role in international trade and diplomacy. Prior to 1400 BC, Hazor was the largest fortified city in all of Canaan and most important in the Fertile Crescent. It maintained commercial ties with Babylon and Syria. It was the head of all the northern Canaanite city-states in the area. Bar none, it would forever be known as the most important victories for the Israelite conquest of the Promised Land. In fact, so important that in the years following, Solomon would rebuild the city for his administration of power, recognizing the crucial position that Hazor possessed as a commercial hub. By looking at the city today, we can clearly define that the city was split into two parts. The upper city, where the tell can be seen, encompassed roughly 20 acres in size. This was the walled area that the administrative city was located, including the palace, temple, storehouses, stables, and large water system, which we'll take a look at in a moment. The lower city was much larger, which is mostly buried today under a massive farming field. It spanned across approximately 180 acres. One very odd feature found on the upper city by archaeologists was a 6-chambered gate that has befuddled historians for decades. Some speculated that they were guard stations or places of commerce. But why 6 rooms? We now have uncovered a clue that these were built by Solomon's empire. It appears to match a record we find in the Old Testament. Here is the account of the forced labor King Solomon conscripted to build the Lord's temple, his own palace, the supporting terraces, the wall of Jerusalem, and Hazor, Megiddo, and Gezer. 1 Kings 9:4. Indeed, this 6-chambered gate can also be found in Megiddo and Gezer, and built in the Solomonic design period. But it is during the period of the Middle to Late Bronze Age that we will focus our attention, and that is where we will find the period where the Israelites destroyed the city. Joshua 11:10-11. Joshua then turned back and captured Hazor, putting its king Jabin to the sword. Hazor in the old days was the foremost of those kingdoms. In compliance with the curse of destruction, they put every living creature to the sword. Not a living soul was left, and Hazor was burnt to the ground. The city was cursed to suffer the same fate as Jericho. Excavating Hazor, the Solomonic period is extremely evident, but further digging in recent times exposed a corner of a Middle Bronze Age palace dating to Israel's sacking of the city. The palace features decorative Syrian-style basalt orthostats forming a zigzag-shaped outer wall, a paved outdoor courtyard with a cultic platform in its center, a raised porch with remains of 2 huge column bases and 2 guard rooms flanking the entrance. Inside the palace core, which is dominated by a central throne room with a floor built of planks of costly cedar of Lebanon. The base of this throne was an immense square-cut stone that is easily seen by viewers today, and there are 4 small holes at its center that experts believe to be the setting for the throne of the king. In Joshua 11:10, Joshua himself was said to enter the palace and put Jabin to death by the sword, likely as he sat on or stood very near this spot. Found inside this palace core, they turned up 3 fragments of tablets written in cuneiform Akkadian. This was in fact the lingua franca of the region, and the language diplomats would write in. This finding led excavators to believe that an archive was close at hand. This palace was built on almost the exact same plan at Al-Alaq in Syria, where an archive room was found with remains of hundreds of cuneiform documents were uncovered. The archives have yet to be found. However, what is very interesting is that one of these tablets has been deciphered to be a letter addressed to the King of Hazor. The name written here in Canaanite, Yabni Adu. Yabni is translated to Hebrew as Jabin. Among other tablets found were documents concerning legal matters, while others consist of fragments of bilingual Akkadian to Sumerian dictionary and a mathematical table as well. These texts suggest, according to expert scholars, that a scribal school was functioning here in Hazor. This is supported by Joshua's account depicting it as an advanced city, while being head of all these kingdoms. The evidence of the burning of Hazor to the ground is extremely evident in this period. According to one of Israel's leading archaeologists, Amnon Ben-Tor, from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, shows us that from inside the Canaanite palace, we see the stone walls and other architectural elements of the palace are cracked thoroughly across the compound. The professor states that it would require tremendous heat to cause this level of damage. He calls it the mother of all fires, and states that it had to be set fire by a conquering army by analyzing the characteristics of this damage. Among the ashes, Ben-Tor discovered a desecrated statue, most likely the king or patron god of Hazor. Its head and hands were cut off, likely by the city's conquerors. Ben-Tor says that there are only a few candidates for who could have caused this destruction to take down the kingdom. The first is the Egyptians, but nowhere in Egypt is there any mention of their taking of Hazor. From our previous videos, we recall how Egypt was extremely proud of their boasting of laying waste to foreign lands. Some of these were Canaanite cities that they cite by name, but never Hazor. Not to mention that Egypt had already collapsed prior to Hazor's destruction. The second candidate is perhaps a rival Canaanite city-state. This is highly unlikely, as Hazor controlled a number of kingdoms at that time, so they were highly defended, and none were nearly as strong as Hazor. Ben-Tor concludes that there was only one remaining candidate strong enough and was present at that time: the Israelites. The biggest key here was that they were the only ones with the motive to desecrate all Canaanite idols in the way they were destroyed, as they were clearly seen as an abomination in the eyes of the one and true living God. More cultic objects or standing stones and shrines were found scattered near the Canaanite temple area. These give clear insight on the Canaanite culture of the time. These were denounced in the Bible, where God commanded that they be destroyed by the Israelites. Again, record reveals that every one of these stones were intentionally defaced and destroyed. Here is where it gets more interesting. Found at an Egyptian archaeological site in Amarna, the capital city of Pharaoh Akhenaten of the late 18th dynasty, was an archive of clay tablets called the Amarna Letters, consisting of diplomatic correspondence between the Egyptian administration and its representatives in Canaan. Found in some of these texts were complaints that the Canaanites sent to Egypt over a people called the Habiru during the early Judges period, as Israel is beginning to settle in the land. The texts describe the political structure of Canaan, which perfectly echoes the biblical description, and it mentions the King of Hazor as a king over other kingdoms, just as Joshua 11 describes. Experts believe that the Habiru is a direct reference to the Hebrews. First, the chronology is correct. They were a threat to the northern Canaanite kingdoms of the time period. Second, its proximity is also correct. Each tablet that speak of the Habiru in a particular area precisely matches the cities in which the Israelites captured or at least seen as a threat according to the Bible. And the third, the etymology is correct. This is the origin of the actual words Habiru and Hebrew. Hebrew derives from Eber, the great-grandson of Shem, who was the son of Noah. God's people, through Abraham, connects through Eber, who became known as the Hebrews. This is especially true for outsiders, as they were known to refer to them as the Hebrews in the Old Testament. It eventually becomes a derogatory term at times, as we see in such instances in Genesis 14:13 with a fugitive speaking with Abraham, Genesis 39:14 and 41:12 against Joseph. On and on it goes. Therefore, the Egyptians adopted this term for them, as it also has the meaning of filthy or dirty in their language. They were also referred to in Akkadian with Hubatu, which also means migrant. So the term Habiru most certainly was a reference to the Hebrews. Moving forward with the archaeological findings in Hazor, a massive water system was found in the southwest corner of the upper city. Studies show that the system existed at the time of Canaanite rule, but there was a major expansion during the 9th century BC. This perfectly coincides with the rule of King Ahab in 870 BC. Not only do the dates match, but its design impeccably echoes that of Tel Megiddo, Gezer, and Lachish. At 45 meters in depth, it was able to provide enough water to withstand the worst droughts and threat of sieges. This brilliant system essentially duplicates the same engineering by both Ahab and Hezekiah, who were also responsible for the tunnel between the Gihon Springs and the Pool of Siloam in Jerusalem, which was only a claimed account in the Bible until its rediscovery in 1837. This is by far more than any amount of evidence that we need to prove once and for all that the Israelites not only ruled in Hazor from approximately 1000 BC, but that it clearly demonstrates that they burned the city at almost the exact period when Jericho was. The evidence for the conquest in Canaan is richly evident in all of the cities that the book of Joshua accounts. From this very period, archaeologists found how the Canaanite culture was thriving at the ruins of Ai, Libnah, Lachish, Eglon, Hebron, and Debir, yet all of them show strong evidence of destruction at precisely the same period. We conclude our series of the conquest, and we'll soon make our way into the final evidence uncovered episodes with the life, death, resurrection, and ascension of Jesus Christ. But before we do, we're going to make a little detour and go back to the very beginning of time with a study on the universe. Here on Evidence Uncovered.